In 1953, the apartheid government enacted the Bantu Education Act, which brought the education of black children under the control of the nationalist government and extended apartheid to black schools through the introduction of Afrikaans. In 1976, school children, first in Soweto and later across the nation, rose up against Bantu education and the government of the day, forever changing the tide in South African politics. Hundreds of young children were killed by the police and many others arrested, tortured, and went missing over the following 10 years of resistance. And we are joined this Youth Day by one of the former students who led the movement at the time and became an integral part of those who chose to stand in the face of discrimination so that the freedoms of today could be enjoyed. Mr. Seth Mazibuko is the member of the June 76 class. Seth,
thank you very much.
Always a pleasure to talk to you, Seth. And thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Very important day, seminal day. This will be forever recorded in history as a time when black South Africa, particularly young South Africa, decided enough is enough.
Sure.
And the question at the time that the young people were resisting against was the fact that they had to be taught in the medium of Afrikaans. But by then, the pain, the hurt, and the humiliation of oppression had already taken its course in the nation. And I think we have to give that background because there was a lull in the country once the top political leaders had been arrested in the 60s. The liberation organizations of the time had been banished into exile.
True.
So it's about what? More than 10 years of quiet time generally in South Africa.
And in that space, space now is getting occupied by also your, white liberals.
Yes.
It was the time, actually it's the time in which even black consciousness had to come up.
Exactly, and so the pockets of at universities when they were beginning to rise up there.
Exactly, you had white-led organizations such as NUSAS, National Union of South African Students, at universities, and those are the ones then that were replaced by SASO, South African Student Organization, BPC, Black People's Convention. So the total lull of black leadership that went underground or in exile, or that were in prison, opened up space for some other people, opportunities to come in.
Yes.
And then that is when the Steve Bikos, the Seth Coopers, the Strini Mutlis, the Muntu Miezas, Tera Likotas occupied that space and started coming up with black consciousness. So some of us, the 1976 generation, had just born out of that.
We're beginning to imbibe the influence and the teaching of these leaders. Yeah.
So we the firstborns of the black consciousness movement, really.
So now, this was from where I'm sitting. You can correct me if I'm wrong. And we have discussed this before. Was that there was going to be a demonstration, a march to resist the introduction of Afrikaans specifically as medium of instruction. It was not intended to be necessarily a big movement against apartheid. Am I correct in that understanding?
You see, we understood as students that time that Afrikaans was just but a small portion of a bigger system.
Yes.
And the bigger system at that time was Bantu education.
Yes.
And the voice of introducing Afrikaans came from MC Botha, who was the Minister of Bantu Affairs and also Bantu Education.
Yes.
And it was carried out by people such as Sam de Beer, who was the inspector of Soweto, actually imposing it. So some of us, when we went to speak, for instance, with our principal to ask that now we wanted to see the two men used a K word and said, you are employed, principal, to make sure that those K children do exactly what we want. We pay you for that.
Yes.
And that's what angered students. And that's what then, after that, an organization such as the South African Student Movement, which is your high school black consciousness movement, came then and invited myself, actually, to come in. And that time there were a few schools that were already out, because it was 6 weeks before June 16, actually.
The rumblings began.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Then they invited us into their annual general meeting. And the issue of supporting schools by having to call other schools to support was not only that issue that was discussed at the SASM conference. I'm trying to bring in this bigger picture. It was also that time the pushing of the cultural boycott. That was one other issue that was discussed in that conference. So the Africans issue was seen not only as just but a medium of instruction, but it was seen in its fullest context.
Yes, a weapon of oppression as well.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But we had to point at a particular issue that was that time.
But sorry, Brother. I mean,
Yes.
then the demonstration is organized, and the march takes place.
Yes.
Now, school children get shot at least on the first day, and they get killed. That very day, I remember, for those who don't come from Soweto and were not there, the news, when it spread around and reached Cape Town, for instance, the young people there could not take it. And within 2 days or so, other parts of the country, now I can recall personally how we felt. It was no longer about the whole point of resistance to apartheid. It was the case that there's no way black children will be killed and nothing gets done about that thing. And I suppose that's how it influenced the rest of the nation.
You know, we didn't have hashtags those days.
Yes.
We didn't have all that, so you cannot call us hashtag Fees Must Fall.
Yes.
But what happened then is that very night of June 16, it was Alexander was on fire.
Yes.
East Rand was on fire. East Rand, now called Eguruleni.
Yes.
Not very long, a week thereafter, on the I think it's the 21st of June, there was killing in KwaZulu-Natal, University of Zululand. And not long after that, it was Port Elizabeth, and then it was Gwalanga and Gwanyanga. The way the 76 June 16 spread is still amazing. And again, I was saying to some students the other day, it showed that struggle did not belong to Soweto. It was the struggle that was felt all over, and then that people were just waiting for that opportunity to come up, and then carried it. It was made more explosive by the number of young people that died that time.
Yes.
Don't forget that June 16 today is actually, in Africa, is the day of the African child.
Yeah.
So this went even to Africa.
Well, I suppose it also gave that generation the confidence that this whole big machine of maintaining apartheid can be toppled.
Exactly.
Because it gave impetus, gave momentum.
And it was also the United Nations that same year that now declared apartheid what is this?
A crime against humanity.
Against humanity.
Yeah.
So you'll understand that I always say that this day, people must respect the state team.
Yes.
We must just really respect it.
But
because it is the day in which I say even the apartheid government started thinking about talking to Mandela, started thinking about opening up the borders and bringing back the leadership we're talking about.
Well, and of course, the people themselves gained self-belief overnight and realized that it is their responsibility to dismantle apartheid. At least for me personally, that was the first time I had a sense that it can be done, and I know a lot of people who share this sentiment. Now, let's fast forward.
Okay.
Here we are, we're marking the day's 40th anniversary, right? So it's important because it created the shift and the push for change. 40 years down the line, 22 years of freedom and democracy. The youth, what is your take in terms of their issues and how they relate to the newly found freedom and the democracy that we enjoy?
Tim, let me be the first one to say this first of all, that I think us as the leaders, particularly those of 1976 and before, must take a blame a bit. And I'm talking to you also as a parent, and a parent is a leader also. I'm also talking to you in this space of media, that we should take responsibility here. You know what we did? After 1994, many of us, Tim, parents of that time, we left our children, the youth today, unattended. We rushed quickly into becoming members of parliament. We rushed quickly into becoming BEEs. We occupied those spaces, and our children were left without leaders. The days of the street committees where people were with their leaders there were no more. We opened up a space that is then occupied by other people who then influenced our children in particular direction. And then now we then say our children that, our youth that. My point is, now in this 40th anniversary, we must do Kumbulekai as parents. Go and make sure that the leadership of 76 speak on the values, the virtues and the victories of the leadership of the time.
Yes.
Transfer these to the youth of today. That our children now are spending time in the bedroom rather than in the boardroom, it is because we are not in that space. That our children now are spending more time in the clubs rather than in the classrooms is that we are not there as leaders. There must be a call, team, where in this 40 years anniversary, I have pleaded, and I'm still pleading. I was doing a lot of rounds in the universities of saying, we need a little bit of CODESA. Team, let us not forget that in the 80s, we also were busy hurting each other. We had what was called black-on-black violence. Of the 11 leaders that were charged, the Soweto 11 that were charged with me, 3 are no more, were killed on that black-on-black violence. We need some peace and reconciliation. We need some CODESA. We need to talk about ourselves. We need to even reflect on what apartheid did to us. Apartheid was a violent system of governing. We've got to come back, team. We owe to the youth today some form of CODESA to even explain how did we get to CODESA. How did we get to 1994?
Yes.
They don't know. Some of them will even say, we sold out.
Yes.
There are those words and all that.
You're right, because you have to explain everything. And you realize that the whole story has not been properly explained on how.
That is why our children will be hijacked by any other culture, by any other people. We owe it to our children. I have this challenge to government, to communities, that now we need some time to talk to each other in a new democratic environment. We need to transfer some of this information to our children. We need to work with our youth. Instead of giving our youth monies that come out of the bedroom, in a sense of, giving them grants when they get babies and give them all those things, it's wrong. We need, I'm not saying it's wrong, maybe I might be judged the other way around, but how much have we had the time?
If I understand, incentivize the right things,
Exactly. Let's have another 40 years. Let's have a plan. I was saying to universities, let's just have a plan, of the only way that I can say I'm happy personally on this 40 years is that now let's have another plan for the next 22 years to the next 40 years. An action plan that how do we grow and how do we develop ourselves.
I accept the challenge personally.
Yes. Let's do that.
We're going to do that.
Let's do that, Chief.
We're going to do that.
Please,
and
Tim.
that's a challenge to many people who were around then in 76 and are the elders now, the parents of children today. Let's join our hands together and find each other and go through this self-healing process and, of course, take the young South Africans along with us. Thank you very much, Seth Mazibuko.